It is Brandon Rottinghaus. A lot of news has been happening in the Texas Legislature this week, from the passing of school voucher bills all the way down to bills centered around the state budget, property taxes, gender and sexuality, and more. Brandon is a political science professor at UH and also happens to be the co-host of Houston Public Media's Party Politics. Brandon, hello there.
Hey, Ernie, how are you?
We are doing well. Before we get into the thick of it all, we had a call right before the break in which our caller referred to the president as a criminal. I just want to verify where we come up with saying that, or people do say that. What is the fact behind it, and is that a true term when referring to Donald Trump?
It's true in the sense that he has convictions, and as a result, you could, I guess, theoretically call him a criminal. Some of the specifics about the punishment have obviously changed a bit. That wasn't exactly what DOJ intended, but at the end of the day, there are still a lot of people with the sentiment that even if he hasn't broken specific laws or gotten charged with the things that they think that he's done, he's definitely skirted the law in ways that make people uncomfortable. That definitely got litigated, not only in courts, but also in the court of public opinion. So there's certainly a lot of kind of unhappiness out there about not just this particular scandal, but lots. There are dozens of members of Congress who have got ethical violations.
Yeah, we just don't want to. We don't want to slander anyone.
Right. We just want to make sure that when a caller says something like that, that we're not slandering the president. That there is reason behind it.
Yeah.
No, that's right. And it is connected to, I think, what people have is a pretty serious concern that their elected officials aren't representing them. So this is not an uncommon thing, I'm sorry to say, but definitely it is the case that we've seen a lot of episodes of this in the last few years.
Okay, on to the things we actually have you here to talk about, Celeste.
Yes, and so speaking of concern, a lot of Texans have some concerns around the voucher bill that was passed by the Texas House earlier this week. So, Brandon, walk us through this. We know where we're at now. What happens next?
Yeah, so effectively, the House has made their final changes to the bill. The Senate, even just literally minutes ago, concurred. So they'll have a joint bill they can send to the governor. The bill has got lots of details in it, but the bottom line is that it plans to spend about $1 billion of funding to put towards these education savings accounts or vouchers. This is something the governor's been pushing for years. And so he's had this day circled on his calendar for a long time. He got a pretty big win here, but it wasn't without some caveats. I don't know that there are any serious objections from Republicans who basically back the bill, because there are lots of fail-safes in the bill that potentially make it reasonable and, at least as we saw, able to be supported by most Republicans. So, for instance, there are annual audits of the program as well as any of the individual vendors involved. There are state-aligned testing requirements that are built into this now because of some of these amendments. There are crackdown on what they call fly-by-night schools. So you can't just kind of open a school and hope to have students. You have to have accreditation for at least a couple of years. So the Republicans and Democrats basically banded together to try to make the bill a bit better. But really, the die was cast. President Trump weighed in on this, pressuring Republicans to say yes, and ultimately Greg Abbott, he kind of got them over the bump.
Hey, Brandon, does a private school have to accept voucher money? Or can they say, you know what, we want to remain independent of whatever the state's rules are, and so we're going to tell our students, sorry, our tuition is our tuition, we don't accept vouchers? Or
It's
can
a
they
great
not?
question, Frank. I think the answer is yes, they could. They don't have to take this money from the state. And there haven't been as many viewpoints from the side of the private schools who've determined exactly how many students they're going to take or kind of how they're going to facilitate the testing requirements that are now part of this bill. So we don't know all the details from the kind of, I guess, supply side of things. But for sure, it's the case that they could say no. And we know that they can say no to students. If they apply to the school, it doesn't mean that you're guaranteed admission. So
Right.
that still is a kind of an issue that they're going to have to resolve.
Two little questions on this first one. So House bill and Senate bill are going to come together and be a single bill, just to clarify that, because it got very confusing even talking about them. One is funding, one is vouchers, but they're all going to be one bill.
That's right. And this is the way typically it works. At this point, because the Senate has concurred with the House's changes from the marathon meeting a couple days ago, they won't have to have a conference committee. They can just basically kind of organize it as it is and send it to the governor's desk, who I'm sure will be very happy.
Okay, I want to move on if that's okay.
Well, last
You have
little
one
one
last-
in there.
okay.
Yeah. When we talk about it, we've brought it up a couple times this week, but just for clarity on it. So is it a fund of money that parents get to use toward education, or is it a voucher that goes to the school system or school itself that uses it? How exactly is it being distributed out?
Yeah, the way it seems to work in the language of the bill is that it'll be something that the parents can essentially direct the controller who's in charge of this to send to the proper place. So the money really follows the student here. And if you have a student enrolled at a particular school and that's the tuition rebate that you intend to take, then there is some way that that gets signaled to the controller's office who will be responsible for this. So we don't know every detail yet. And obviously, too, some of the fight was about kind of how much money to put to the infrastructure around this. The fiscal note on the bill implies that it will basically require about an extra 400 or so people to administer. That could be something that obviously creates a bit more government. So we don't know every detail in answer to your question, Ernie, but it'll function something along those lines.
Okay, Frank, move on.
I want to turn to property taxes. What happened there, Brandon?
Well, they're still fighting through property taxes. The budgets for House and Senate have basically been framed. They still need to put the fixtures in, so they'll have some specific details that they'll work through. The House this week had a marathon budget debate. They indicated changes they wanted to see. They ended up with a bunch of amendments that increased or decreased various monies. But ultimately, at the end of the day, there's going to be a pretty substantial amount of money put to the property tax efforts in both chambers. In particular, the amount of money is about $51 billion in this biennial budget. And keep in mind that the House and Senate sort of bills that is the revenue that the state has, if you take out the federal money, which is about a third of the total budget, that's a big chunk of the total budget for the House and Senate. So this is a lot of money they're going to spend on property taxes.
Okay, so are my property taxes going to come down or not?
I think the short answer is it really depends.
Okay.
It depends on what the appraisal looks like.
All right, we'll move on.
Where you are.
We want to
Well, I'll say this. The Republicans want to say yes, that your property taxes will come down, and they probably will. I think for most people that's true. The issue here is how long they'll stay down for and whether or not, the appraisals will rise up to meet, and then whether or not the state has the money to continue to pay for these in the future. That's a real question.
Yep.
$51 billion is a lot of money, and if you have that in every biennial budget, it definitely takes a big chunk of the general revenue.
We're talking to political science professor at the University of Houston, Brandon Rottinghaus. You can join the conversation with your questions and concerns at 713-440-8870.
I always love the political intrigue. That's where I get into politics here. So I'm wondering, from what we've seen in this session so far, has this been a lift for the governor or has it been a detraction from the governor? Is he standing stronger at this point or weaker than when January was here?
Yeah, it's a great question. We've actually seen a real transition in Texas government to have strong governors. This was true from basically Governor Perry moving forward. There is this old saw in Texas politics that says that the lieutenant governor is the most powerful person in Texas government. I think we have to shut that down. I think now, actually, having seen the effectiveness by which the governor has been able to rally his own party and really reshape his own party, and then to cement the powers of the governorship through this pretty signature win, means that we can stop talking about the lieutenant governor as the most important and most impactful member of the plural executive. The governor definitely has a pretty big sway here. But the way that he got it was not the same that we've seen in the past. The way that Governor Perry would get these wins with through finesse, where Governor Abbott's getting it likely through force. He really has pressured his own party to be able to side with him. He's gone to the electorate, spending $6 million+ to reshape the party. So he definitely had to really press to get what he wanted. But this is the signature win he's been looking for a couple of years.
How tied is the governor's administration to the president's administration at this point? We heard even when it came to vouchers, there were phone calls back and forth. How closely connected are we?
Yeah, you make a great point. Donald Trump weighed into the Republican caucus just before the voucher vote, and I think really suggested that this wasn't necessarily the closer. I think Abbott had the votes, but he definitely implied, that is, the president implied, that this is a monitoring sort of situation, that MAGA is watching. And I think for a lot of Republicans, they're worried about their prospects electorally in what likely is going to be a pretty contentious primary. Remember, these things don't happen in a vacuum. The primary is going to consist of a top of the ticket heavyweight battle between John Cornyn and Ken Paxton running for the U.S. Senate. So that's going to bring out all of the conservatives. And so if you're a member of the House thinking, how should I vote on vouchers? One big piece of that is how the very conservative electorate that's likely to come out and support is going to react to that. So in more direct answer to your question, the Trump administration definitely has become a kingmaker in Texas, and most Republicans are very aware of this.
Brandon, where are the bills on sexuality and on gender stand?
There are a lot of bills involving these sorts of social issues, and they're at various stages of completion. We are running short of time in the Ledge. They've got basically about a month left to do real work, and depending on what kind of bill it is and where it came from, that is the Senate or if it's through committee, all these various rules are all kind of complicated. But the bottom line is that they have to hurry if they want to push some of these agendas through. Next week, we're going to hear some big issues on abortion. There's a potential for there to be a very controversial bill on abortion rights that would make Texas as effectively as the sort of as hard on abortion rights as.
So do you think that maybe should they maybe be meeting every year rather than every 2 years?
There has been consistent efforts to try to move Texas to a year-round legislature, and they've almost always failed. Yeah. If we do this, it has to go to the voters, and the voters have rejected it over the course of the last 70 years. So I don't know how people would react to it right now, but I think most people look at the 2-year legislature and say, we probably need to be meeting more often. Doing a 2-year budget is already a challenge, and so that's one issue that is the most impactful. But yeah, a megastate like Texas that's growing so fast with so many needs probably should have a legislature that meets more often.
Yeah, agreed.
Brandon Rottinghaus is the political science professor at the University of Houston and a co-host of Houston Public Media's Party Politics. Brandon, thanks so much for joining Frank, Ernie, and myself.
You're welcome.
Yeah.
Happy Friday.
Come back early and often.
Coming up.